Welcome to the therapy room. A place where psychology becomes understanding, and understanding becomes healing. I'm a psychologist passionate about helping people better understand themselves, their emotions, their relationships, and the hidden psychological forces that shape their lives. And today, I want to begin with a question. Have you ever looked around and felt like everyone else is moving forward? Everyone else is succeeding. Everyone else is finding love, building careers, buying homes, achieving goals, traveling, growing, living, while somehow you feel stuck, as if life is happening for everyone except you. Maybe you've opened social media and felt it. Maybe you've seen old classmates getting married, friends buying houses, people your age becoming successful, starting businesses, building families, reaching milestones. And somewhere deep inside, a quiet voice whispered, "What am I doing wrong? Why am I so far behind? Why does everyone seem to have figured life out except me?" If you've ever felt this way, I want you to know something. You are not alone. In fact, this may be one of the most common psychological struggles of modern life. And more than 100 years ago, Alfred Adler understood exactly why it happens. Long before social media. Long before smartphones. Long before Instagram. Adler discovered something remarkable about human nature. Human beings naturally compare themselves to others. And when those comparisons become unhealthy, they create feelings of inferiority, discouragement, self-doubt, anxiety, and suffering. The painful part is that most people don't even realize they're doing it. They simply wake up every day feeling as though they're falling behind. Running a race they never agreed to enter. Trying to reach a finish line that keeps moving further away. And no matter how much they accomplish, it never feels like enough. Today we're going to explore why this happens. Why so many people feel left behind. Why comparison steals happiness. Why social media has made this struggle even worse. And what Alfred Adler believed we must do if we want to reclaim our peace of mind. Before we begin, I'd like to ask for a small favor. If you're interested in psychology, emotional healing, personal development, self-awareness, and understanding the human mind, consider subscribing to the therapy room. Every subscription helps us continue creating these conversations and reach more people who may need them. You'll also find links in the profile description to books and additional resources for those who want to continue exploring psychology, personal growth, and the deeper questions of life. And if this conversation resonates with you, please share it with someone who might need to hear it. Every video on this channel is created with great care, with the hope that a single insight might change someone's life. Now let's begin. Because the feeling that everyone is ahead of you may not be telling you the truth. Imagine running a race. You start strong. You feel motivated, focused, determined. For a moment, you're simply moving forward. Then you look to your left. Someone is ahead of you. You look to your right. Someone else is moving faster. Suddenly, something changes. You're no longer focused on your path. You're focused on theirs. And this is where suffering often begins. According to Alfred Adler, one of the deepest desires of human beings is the desire for significance. The desire to matter. To contribute. To feel valuable. To feel capable. To feel that our lives have meaning. There is nothing wrong with this desire. In fact, Adler believed it is one of the forces that drives growth. The problem begins when we stop measuring our progress against our own lives and start measuring it against everyone else's. Think about how often this happens. Someone gets promoted. Someone gets married. Someone buys a house. Someone starts a business. Someone becomes successful. Someone reaches a goal you've been dreaming about. And suddenly what should have been their victory becomes your self-judgment. You stop asking, "What do I want?" and start asking, "Why don't I have what they have?" It's a subtle shift. But it changes everything. Because comparison creates a game that can never truly be won. There will always be someone richer, someone younger, someone more attractive, someone more successful, someone further ahead, someone who appears happier, someone who seems to have figured everything out. And if your self-worth depends on being ahead of others, peace becomes impossible. Because the target never stops moving. Adler understood this long before social media existed. He observed that many people develop what he called feelings of inferiority. Now, when people hear that phrase, they often misunderstand it. They imagine weakness, low self-esteem, lack of confidence. But Adler's idea was much deeper. He believed every human being experiences feelings of inferiority at some point. Every single one. Children feel smaller than adults. Students compare themselves to classmates. Employees compare themselves to coworkers. Parents compare themselves to other parents. Human beings constantly notice what they lack, what they haven't achieved, what they wish they were. The problem is not noticing these differences. The problem is building your identity around them. Because once comparison becomes your primary lens, life begins to feel unfair. No achievement feels sufficient. No progress feels meaningful. No success feels satisfying. You may achieve something you've wanted for years. And instead of celebrating, your mind immediately finds someone who has more. Someone who did it faster. Someone who seems further ahead. And just like that, joy disappears. Think about how tragic that is. A person can achieve their dream and still feel inadequate. Not because the dream wasn't valuable. Because comparison stole the ability to enjoy it. This is one of the greatest psychological traps of modern life. Many people aren't suffering because they're failing. They're suffering because they're comparing. And there is a profound difference between those two things. In fact, some of the most accomplished people in the world secretly feel behind. Not because they are behind. Because they have convinced themselves they should be somewhere else by now. Perhaps you've experienced this. Maybe you thought, I should have achieved more by this age. I should be further along. I should have figured life out by now. I should be doing better. Those words sound harmless. But they carry enormous emotional weight. Because hidden inside every should is a comparison. A comparison between your actual life and an imaginary standard. And the more you compare yourself to that standard, the more discouraged you become. Adler believed discouragement was one of the greatest psychological obstacles people face. Because discouraged people stop seeing possibilities. They stop noticing progress. They stop recognizing their strengths. All they see is distance. Distance between where they are and where they think they should be. And here's the cruel irony. The more discouraged people become, the more they compare themselves to others. And the more they compare themselves to others, the more discouraged they become. A vicious cycle. One that millions of people are trapped inside without realizing it. But if comparison has always existed, why does it feel so much worse today? Why do so many people wake up feeling as though everyone else is winning? Why has this feeling become almost impossible to escape? To answer that question, we need to talk about something Adler never lived to see. Something that has transformed comparison into a daily psychological battle. Social media. And in many ways, it may be making this struggle far worse than ever before. Now we arrive at one of Alfred Adler's most important ideas. An idea that has influenced psychology for more than a century. The feeling of inferiority. At first, that phrase may sound uncomfortable. Most people hear it and immediately think, something is wrong with me. I'm not good enough. I'm weak. But that is not what Adler meant. In fact, Adler believed that feelings of inferiority are a normal part of being human. Every person who has ever lived has experienced them. Including highly successful people. Including confident people. Including people who seem to have everything together. The difference is not whether we experience feelings of inferiority. The difference is how we respond to them. Think about childhood. When we're young, we enter a world filled with people who are bigger, stronger, smarter, and more capable than we are. Children depend on others. They need help, guidance, protection, support. And because of this, every child naturally becomes aware of their limitations. Adler believed that this awareness creates the first feelings of inferiority. Not because the child is broken. Because the child is growing. In many ways, the desire to improve begins there. A child notices they cannot walk. So they learn. They notice they cannot read. So they learn. They notice they cannot do something yet. And that motivates growth. According to Adler, this process is healthy. The problem begins when feelings of inferiority stop being temporary experiences and start becoming permanent identities. What a person no longer says, "I need to improve," and begins saying, "I am not enough." Those two statements may sound similar. But psychologically, they are worlds apart. One creates growth. The other creates suffering. One focuses on progress. The other focuses on self-worth. And this is where many people become trapped. Because somewhere along the way, they stop measuring what they are becoming. And start measuring how they compare. Perhaps you've experienced this yourself. You achieve something important. But instead of feeling proud, you immediately compare yourself to someone who has achieved more. You reach a goal. But then notice someone who reached it sooner. You make progress. But someone else appears further ahead. And suddenly your accomplishment feels smaller. Not because it changed. Because comparison changed the way you see it. Adler observed this pattern constantly. People who were objectively doing well but felt like failures. People who had accomplished remarkable things but felt inadequate. People who spent their entire lives chasing worthiness without ever feeling worthy. And the tragic part is that no achievement can solve that problem. Because the issue is not external. It is internal. Think about this carefully. If feeling behind were truly caused by circumstances, then success would solve it. Money would solve it. Recognition would solve it. Status would solve it. But we know that isn't true. Some of the most successful people in the world still feel inadequate. Still compare. Still doubt themselves. Still wonder if they are enough. Why? Because comparison is not really about achievement. It is about identity. It is about the story we tell ourselves about our value. And if that story says, "I'm only valuable when I'm ahead," then peace becomes impossible. Because someone will always be ahead. There will always be another milestone. Another comparison. Another standard. Another person who appears more successful. This is why Adler believed the pursuit of superiority often becomes a trap. Not superiority over yourself. Superiority over others. And that pursuit never ends. Because it was never designed to. The moment you surpass one person, your mind finds another. The moment you achieve one goal, comparison creates a new one. The finish line moves. Again. And again. And again. Until life begins to feel like an endless race. A race where no victory feels permanent. A race where no achievement feels sufficient. A race where exhaustion becomes normal. But what if the race itself is the problem? What if the reason you feel behind has nothing to do with where you are? What if it has everything to do with the standards you're using to measure yourself? Because there is a lie that millions of people believe every day. A lie so common that it often goes unnoticed. A lie that quietly fuels comparison, anxiety, discouragement, and self-doubt. And in the next part of our conversation, we're going to expose that lie. Because once you see it clearly, it begins to lose its power. What if I told you that one of the most painful thoughts in modern life is also one of the most misleading? The thought sounds something like this. I'm behind. At first, it feels like a fact. It feels obvious. It feels undeniable. People say it every day. I'm behind in my career. I'm behind financially. I'm behind in life. I'm behind compared to everyone else. But Alfred Adler would ask an important question. Behind whom? Take a moment and really think about that. Behind whom? Because hidden inside the feeling of being behind is an assumption. An assumption so common that most people never stop to question it. The assumption that there is a correct timeline for life. A schedule. A universal roadmap. A perfect sequence of events that everyone should follow. Graduate by a certain age. Build a career by a certain age. Get married by a certain age. Buy a house by a certain age. Have children by a certain age. Achieve success by a certain age. And if your life doesn't match that timeline, you begin feeling as though you failed. But where did that timeline come from? Who created it? Who decided that your life should unfold according to someone else's schedule? Most people never ask these questions. They simply inherit expectations. From society. From culture. From family. From social media. From people who are just as uncertain as they are. And then they spend years judging themselves against standards they never consciously chose. This is one of the greatest psychological illusions of our time. The belief that everyone else knows what they're doing. Look around. Most people appear confident. Certain. In control. Successful. But appearances are often deceptive. Many of the people you compare yourself to are struggling too. They have fears. Doubts. Failures. Regrets. Moments of uncertainty. Moments when they feel lost. Moments when they wonder if they're doing enough. The difference is that you rarely see those moments. You see the presentation. Not the preparation. You see the success. Not the sacrifice. You see the celebration. Not the struggle. You see the outcome. Not the years of uncertainty that came before it. And because of that, comparison creates a distorted picture of reality. A picture where everyone appears ahead. Everyone appears certain. Everyone appears successful. Everyone appears happy. Except you. But that picture isn't real. It's incomplete. And incomplete information creates inaccurate conclusions. Imagine watching the final 5 minutes of a movie and assuming you understand the entire story. That's what comparison often does. You see a tiny fragment of another person's journey and compare it to your entire life. Their visible success. Your invisible struggles. Their highlight. Your reality. And then you wonder why you feel discouraged. Adler believed that discouragement is one of the most dangerous psychological states a person can experience. Because discouraged people stop believing in their own potential. They stop recognizing their progress. They stop seeing possibilities. They become trapped in a story. A story that says, everyone else is moving forward. Everyone else is succeeding. Everyone else is ahead. And perhaps the most damaging part of all. The story feels true. Even when it isn't. Because repetition creates belief. The more often you tell yourself you're behind, the more convincing the story becomes. Eventually, you stop questioning it. You simply accept it. But what if the story is wrong? What if you are not behind? What if your life is unfolding according to a path that is uniquely yours? What if the problem isn't your progress? What if the problem is the ruler you're using to measure it? That possibility changes everything. Because the moment you stop comparing your journey to someone else's, you begin seeing your own life more clearly. Your own growth. Your own victories. Your own lessons. Your own path. And perhaps for the first time in a long time, you begin feeling something that comparison rarely allows. Relief. But there is still one question left. If there is no universal timeline, if comparison is misleading, If everyone's journey is different, then how should we measure our lives? How do we know if we're growing? How do we know if we're moving forward? How do we stop feeling behind? That is where Adler's most hopeful insight begins. And it may completely change the way you see your future. Imagine asking a tree why it isn't a flower. Or asking a flower why it isn't a tree. The question itself doesn't make sense. Because each one grows according to its own nature. Its own timing. Its own path. And yet, human beings do this to themselves every day. They compare completely different lives as though they should unfold in exactly the same way. Alfred Adler believed that one of the greatest mistakes people make is forgetting their individuality. Forgetting that every human life is unique. Every person begins from a different place. Faces different challenges. Receives different opportunities. Carries different wounds. Lives under different circumstances. And yet we often expect identical outcomes. Think about two people standing at the base of a mountain. One starts halfway up. The other starts at the bottom. If both reach the same point, have they accomplished the same thing? Of course not. The journey matters. The obstacles matter. The distance traveled matters. But comparison rarely considers any of these things. Comparison only looks at the outcome. It ignores the story. And that is why it is so misleading. You may be comparing your chapter 3 to someone else's chapter 20. Your beginning to someone else's middle. Your struggle to someone else's breakthrough. And then wondering why you feel behind. The truth is that life is not a standardized test. There is no universal schedule. No official timeline. No cosmic rulebook that says, by 25 you must have this. By 30 you must achieve that. By 40 you must become this person. Those expectations are often created by culture. By society. By social media. By the opinions of people who are just as uncertain as everyone else. And when we adopt those expectations without questioning them, we begin living someone else's life instead of our own. Adler spent much of his career encouraging people to develop what he called courage. Not the courage to compete. Not the courage to prove themselves. The courage to be themselves. The courage to follow their own path even when it looks different from everyone else's. And that requires something difficult. It requires letting go of the need to keep score. Think about how much suffering comes from scorekeeping. I'm behind. They're ahead. They have more. They got there first. What if those measurements are irrelevant? What if life is not asking you to outrun other people? What if life is asking you to become more fully yourself? That question changes everything. Because now growth is no longer about comparison. It's about development. It's about becoming wiser than you were yesterday. More aware than you were yesterday. More compassionate. More courageous. More authentic. And unlike comparison, that kind of progress never depends on another person. Adler believed that the healthiest individuals are not focused on proving their superiority. They are focused on contribution. They ask, how can I help? How can I grow? How can I make life better for myself and others? Notice how different those questions feel. They create purpose instead of pressure. Meaning instead of measurement. Connection instead of competition. And perhaps that is what so many people are missing today. Not more success. Not more achievement. Not more comparison. More meaning. Because when life has meaning, timelines lose much of their power. You stop obsessing over where you should be. And start focusing on where you are going. You stop measuring your worth by speed. And start measuring it by growth. You stop asking, am I ahead? And begin asking, am I becoming the person I want to be? That question is far more important. Because one day, you'll realize something extraordinary. The people you spent years comparing yourself to were never your competition. They were simply living their lives. While you were meant to be living yours. And once that realization arrives, A tremendous weight begins to lift. The race starts to disappear. The pressure begins to fade. And for perhaps the first time in years, you begin giving yourself permission to move at your own pace. But there is still one final lesson. One final truth Adler wanted people to understand. A truth that has the power to free you from comparison once and for all. Because your life was never meant to be a race. And in the final part of this conversation, we're going to explore what happens when you finally stop running against everyone else and start walking your own path. Let's return to the feeling that brought us here. The feeling that everyone is ahead. The feeling that you're falling behind. The feeling that somehow life is working for everyone else, but not for you. Perhaps after everything we've explored today, you can begin seeing that feeling differently. Not as a fact. Not as reality. But as a story. A story that many people have been telling themselves for years. A story fueled by comparison. By unrealistic expectations. By social pressure. By carefully edited images of other people's lives. A story that says, "You're late. You should be further ahead. You've missed your chance. Everyone else is doing better." But Alfred Adler would likely ask a different question. What if none of that is true? What if the problem was never your progress? What if the problem was believing that your life should look like someone else's? Think about how much pressure disappears the moment you stop treating life as a competition. The pressure to catch up. The pressure to prove yourself. The pressure to reach milestones on schedule. The pressure to constantly compare. The pressure to always be more. More successful. More productive. More accomplished. More impressive. More everything. It is exhausting. And perhaps the reason so many people feel tired today is not because they are carrying too little. It's because they are carrying expectations that were never theirs to begin with. Adler believed that mental health is not built upon superiority. It is built upon courage. The courage to accept yourself. The courage to grow. The courage to contribute. The courage to keep moving forward even when your path looks different from everyone else's. And that takes strength. Because comparison will always tempt you. Social media will always tempt you. The world will always offer new reasons to feel inadequate. But you do not have to accept that invitation. You do not have to spend your life measuring yourself against people who are walking entirely different paths. You do not have to turn every success story into evidence of your own failure. And perhaps most importantly, you do not have to earn your worth. Read that again. You do not have to earn your worth. You are already worthy of respect. Already worthy of growth. Already worthy of happiness. Already worthy of becoming the person you are capable of becoming. Not when you finally reach some future milestone. Now. Today. In this moment. Because your value does not come from being ahead of someone else. Your value comes from being fully yourself. And maybe that's the lesson Alfred Adler was trying to teach all along. A meaningful life is not built by winning against others. It is built by becoming who you were meant to become. At your pace. On your path. In your own time. Before we finish, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever felt behind in life? What part of this conversation resonated with you the most? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I read as many comments as possible, and your experiences help create a community where people realize they are not alone in these struggles. And if this video helped you see yourself with a little more compassion today, please consider subscribing to the Therapy Room. Every week we explore psychology, emotional healing, self-awareness, human behavior, relationships, personal development, and the ideas of great thinkers like Alfred Adler, Carl Jung, Aaron Beck, Viktor Frankl, Erich Fromm, Abraham Maslow, and many others. Every subscription helps strengthen this channel and allows us to continue creating thoughtful content for people all around the world who are searching for understanding, healing, and growth. You'll also find links in the profile description to books and additional resources for those who wish to continue exploring psychology, the human mind, and personal development beyond these videos. And if someone came to mind while watching this conversation, a friend, a sibling, a son, a daughter, a partner, someone who constantly feels left behind, please share this video with them. These videos are created with great care, and sometimes a single idea arrives at exactly the moment someone needs it most. Thank you for spending this time with me. Thank you for your trust. And thank you, Alfred Adler, for reminding us that life was never meant to be a race. Remember, someone else's timeline is not your destiny. You are not behind. You are simply becoming. Take care of yourself. And I'll see you in the next conversation.